Sugar didn't just sweeten history, it built empires. A spoon in your coffee, a chocolate bar, a birthday cake looks harmless. But sugar's story doesn't begin in your kitchen. It begins on tropical plantations, in contracts, on ships crossing the Atlantic. For 500 years, sugar has powered wealth, industry, and war. It fueled the Industrial Revolution. It shaped global trade. And today, it shapes you. Today, it surrounds us. It is part of a system designed to keep consumption constant. How did a simple biological substance become infrastructure? And what is that infrastructure doing to your body? This episode follows the path of sugar from plantations to factories, from factories to the shelf, and from the shelf into us. To understand an entire system, you have to start with a single spoonful of sugar. Sugar is not just a taste, it's power. For centuries, it was one of the most powerful commodities in the global economy. The anthropologist Sidney Mintz described it as a lens for understanding modern capitalism. He meant that literally. The shift from luxury to necessity was not driven by a simple love of sweetness. It was part of a deeper process, commercial, colonial, and industrial expansion. In medieval Europe, sugar was rare. In the 16th century, everything changed. Sugarcane was planted in the Caribbean and in Brazil, and European demand surged rapidly. Sugar demanded brutal labor. Mortality was high. At first light, before the heat became unbearable, rows of forced laborers entered the cane fields. The moment the cane was cut, time became money. To meet demand, European powers turned to the transatlantic slave trade. Between 12 and 15 million Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas. Many of them were put to work on sugar plantations. Sugar was not a byproduct of empire, it was its engine. It financed the system that made it possible. Profits from the plantations flowed directly into London, Amsterdam, and other financial centers. They financed banks, maritime insurance, merchant fleets, and military activity. When a commodity finances trade, banks, and war, it is no longer food, it becomes infrastructure. During the 19th century, as production expanded and prices fell, sugar left aristocratic circles and became more accessible. In Britain, per capita, sugar consumption surged from relatively negligible amounts in the early 18th century to tens of kilograms per year by the end of the 19th century. It became integrated into industrial work patterns, especially through sweetened tea and other inexpensive products that provided quick energy. Energy for longer shifts. Energy for higher output. Control over sugar was economic and bodily. Historical records show that on plantations in the Caribbean and the Americas, sugar and molasses were part of a system of control. In cases of tension, suspicion of rebellion or attempted escape, plantation owners reduced food rations, including the rationing of molasses or sugar, which served as a fast and accessible source of calories. Sugar was not a reward, it was leverage. Sweetness was rationed like discipline. And whoever controlled sweetness controlled the body. Later, fuel for the Industrial Revolution. Today, a cornerstone of the global food industry, the sweetness changed. The mechanism didn't. First, the body was forced to produce within the system. In the second stage, it was fed in order to continue functioning within it. In the 20th century, with the rise of the processed food industry, sugar took on another role. It served not only as a sweetener, but also as a preservative, a texture stabilizer, and a flavor enhancer. Its low cost, broad availability, and ability to trigger immediate reward made it a central ingredient in the industrial economy of food. For centuries in Europe, sugar was a luxury, expensive, rare, imported. In early British records, it appeared alongside exotic spices, medicine, decoration, preservative. It was special, not routine. In the 17th and 18th centuries, new beverages spread across Europe. tea, coffee, and chocolate. When the drink became daily, so did the sugar. It appeared again and again in the morning cup, during a break, at a social gathering. No revolution, just habit. The turning point came in the 19th century. Falling prices, tariff reforms, and the expansion of beet sugar production in Europe made sugar far more accessible. What had once signaled status became household routine. Industrial life was fast, exhausting. Sugar offered cheap energy, sweetened tea, jams, basic baked goods, quick calories at low cost. A short lunch break in a factory in Boston, a cup of hot tea, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and back to the machines. That was the shift. Nations produced more. People consumed more. The spoon in the teacup normalized. Sweetness stopped being rare. It became normal. That was the decisive moment. Once something becomes routine, it stops feeling exceptional. It becomes a commodity. In the first stage of sugar's modern history, the body was a tool of production. It was forced to work on plantations and in factories. In the second stage, the body was fed to keep working. Sweetened tea, cheap calories, quick energy. In the 20th century, the shift deepened. The body stopped being labor. It became a market, a supermarket, an entire shelf of brightly colored drinks. Promises on the packaging: light, natural, fat-free. Almost all of them are loaded with sugar. The economy shifts. Growth no longer relies on production alone. It relies on consumption. A system built on constant demand needs products that sell again and again. Sugar fits perfectly. It extends shelf life, stabilizes texture, enhances flavor. It's cheap. The real shift: in the past, control was visible. Fields, forced labor, discipline. Today, it's invisible. Processed food is cheaper and more accessible than fresh food. Marketing targeted at children builds early attachment to sweetness. Packaging, promotions, shelf placement. They shape choice without banning alternatives. When authorities attempted to impose taxes on sugary drinks, the response wasn't removal. It was adaptation, public campaign, lobbying, and at times legal moves that limit local initiatives. In some places, contracts are signed that grant exclusivity for the sale of sugary drinks in public institutions, including schools and campuses. The choice still exists, but the menu is set in advance. What has changed? There is no longer transatlantic slavery. There is no visible physical coercion. What has not changed? Sugar remains highly profitable, and it continues to integrate into broad economic systems. The systems aren't identical. The logic is: what connects body, profit, and growth? Over the past 40 years, diabetes has surged. Hundreds of millions of people now live with the disease, most with type 2. It didn't happen overnight. It accumulated. Routine blood tests. A number slightly higher than expected. Nothing dramatic, just a first sign. When you consume sugar, it becomes glucose in your bloodstream. The pancreas releases insulin, allowing cells to use sugar for energy. The body can handle a temporary spike. The problem begins when the spike is daily. With sustained exposure, cells respond less efficiently. This condition is known as insulin resistance. The body compensates. It releases more insulin. It works to maintain balance. Over time, the strain accumulates. Diabetes is linked to many factors: genetics, body, weight, physical activity, and diet. In a world where sugar-rich food is cheap, accessible, and heavily marketed, daily exposure is constant. When the environment pushes constant consumption of sugary drinks and processed food, it is the body that is required to adapt. Biologically, this is chronic stress. In systemic terms, the cost accumulates over decades. It doesn't fall on the individual alone. It also falls on entire healthcare systems. The problem isn't a single spoonful. It's normalization. If sugar was once a story of fields and plantations, here, the field is the brain. Now, the field is internal. not only because the body suffers, but because this is where the transition happens, from cheap ingredient to profit engine. To understand this, we need to remember a simple fact. Sugar is not just a calorie, it is a biological signal, a hormonal and neurological signal. Sugar activates dopamine pathways. A small bite, a moment of pleasure, then another one. Not from hunger, but habit. What happens when this becomes daily? Repeated exposure changes how the brain responds. Over time, tolerance develops, more for the same effect. This isn't a claim of addiction, it's a shift in pattern. It reflects structural changes in eating behavior. Beyond chronic disease, studies indicate a connection between diets high in ultra-processed food and long-term cognitive function and attention. The link between sugar consumption and attention problems has not been scientifically proven. However, excess sugar may worsen symptoms, such as hyperactivity, restlessness, and irritability in children. Sugar causes rapid fluctuations in energy, which may affect the ability to maintain focus. And from here, the next question arises. If the body is the field, who shapes the environment around it? We like to think we choose. We see a shelf, choose a product, pay, and move on. But choice happens inside a structure. The World Health Organization is clear. To reduce the impact of unhealthy food on children, both exposure and the power of marketing must be reduced. Studies show a clear connection between advertising and increased consumption and purchase requests. This isn't ideology. It is a measurable field of research. Beyond advertising, the food environment works below awareness. Portion size, shelf placement, promotions at the checkout, availability on every corner. At the checkout line, facing a long wait, snacks are placed exactly at eye level. When ultra-processed food is cheaper and easier to reach, the choice shifts before you make it. In many countries, a large share of calories comes from products that combine sugars, fats, and additives. In such a situation, the choice is not between sugar and no sugar, but between different versions of the same industrial infrastructure. Fatigue at the end of a workday, a quick decision in front of a brightly lit shelf, sweet and tasty. No one forces a spoonful of sugar. If what's cheap and visible is high in sugar, freedom changes form. The question isn't what you choose, it's who sets the menu. How does sugar survive criticism, science, and regulation? Every complex system stabilizes itself. In the body, homeostasis. In the economy, the market. In politics, interests. Across centuries, the pattern is clear. As criticism increases, the system adapts. When sugar taxes were imposed, products were downsized. When added sugars labels appeared, no added sugar versions were launched. The system changes form. Criticism is absorbed. The activity continues. The mechanism is simple. Profit now. Cost later. The health costs accumulate over years and fall on individuals and public systems. When the cost is not reflected in the price, the system can continue operating. This is not a moral argument, it is a structure of incentives. The adaptation is not only institutional, it is also biological. Sugar provides quick energy and immediate reward. In an economy built on speed and availability, it integrates with no friction. If we look at 500 years of sugar, slavery, the Industrial Revolution, health criticism, regulation, different eras, same pattern. In the 1970s, sharper criticism emerged, among other places in the book Sugar Blues by William Dufty. The book wasn't academic. It resonated culturally and helped spark the natural food and anti-sugar movement in the United States. The criticism did not disappear, but neither did sugar. Once, bodies were shaped for the purposes of production. Fields, plantations, factories. Energy meant labor. Today, habits are shaped for the purposes of consumption. Shelves, advertisements, Algorithms? Energy is attention. The form has changed. The principle hasn't. Sugar moved with this transition, from aristocratic luxury to industrial fuel, to a foundation of processed food and public policy. Is sugar just a dietary ingredient? Or is it part of a system that depends on immediate energy and constant desire? This is not a call for total abstinence. It is a question about the connection between something small, a single spoonful that dissolves, and a network of history, economics, and biology. The sugar disappears in the cup, but the conditions within which we choose remain. A revolution isn't required. Awareness is. To understand what added sugar means, to pay attention to exposure, especially among children. To ask who shapes the environment around us. Large systems don't change overnight, but sometimes understanding the structure is the first step. And that brings us back to the beginning. A spoonful of sugar in your morning tea. We call it sweet. The real question is this: what else is dissolving in it?